There is a board in your house right now. In a cupboard, probably. Under something heavier. It is a loop. You go round and round it and you never arrive anywhere, and that is not a flaw in the design. That is the design. In 1904, almost every board game on sale had a start and a finish. You set off, you got somewhere, you won. Mine had no finish. I drew a track that came back to where it began, ringed it with properties and railroads and rents, and I put a price and a rental value in every block. The Patent Office granted it on the 5th of January, 1904, number 748626. I was 37, I was a stenographer, and I could not vote. You have played on my board. What is not in your cupboard is the second rulebook. My father published a newspaper in Illinois and traveled the state with Abraham Lincoln, listening to him argue with Stephen Douglas. He gave me a book by a man called Henry George. George's argument was simple enough to fit on a card. Land is not made by anybody. Its value comes from everyone living near it. So the rent that a landlord collects is not payment for work. It is a toll collected on other people's presence. Tax that, said George, and tax nothing else. I could not make people read 400 pages. So I built the argument out of cardboard. I called it the Landlord's game. I wrote at the time that it was a practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing, with all its usual outcomes and consequences. I meant children, mostly. Children have a very exact sense of unfairness before they are taught to call it economics, and I thought if they felt it at 9 they might still know it at 40. And here is the part that has been lost. To make anyone feel it, one demonstration is not enough. You have to play the same board twice. So. 4 squares. Watch them. Square 1. You land on an unowned property. You buy it. It is yours now. And it is yours for the rest of the game. And nothing you do afterwards is required of you. Square 2. Another player lands on it. They pay you rent. They have not received anything. Nothing has been built. Nothing has been grown. Nothing has changed hands but the money. The rent is charged for the fact of arriving. Square 3. You buy the property next to it. Now the rents on both go up, because you hold both. Your advantage compounds without your involvement. Square 4. A player runs out. They are removed from the table. The game continues without them and is easier for everyone remaining. Under these rules, the game ends when one player holds everything and everybody else has been put out. There is one winner, and the winner is whoever got there first and then simply waited. That is the version in your cupboard. Now the same 4 squares. The same order. Nothing on the board has moved. Square 1. You land on the unowned property. You buy it, but the money does not vanish into your pocket. It goes to the public treasury. The land was not made by you. Its price reflects the people around it. Square 2. Another player lands on it and pays. And that rent goes to the treasury too, and out again, to every player at the table, including the one who just paid it. Square 3. You buy the property next door. The rents rise, exactly as before, and the rise is collected and shared, exactly as before. You have gained convenience. You have not gained a toll. Square 4. A player runs low. Nobody is removed. There is nothing in the rules that removes them. And the game is won, and this is the part I would like you to hold on to. The game is won when the poorest player has doubled the money they started with. Not the richest. The poorest. Nobody wins alone, because the win condition is written on somebody else's pile. Same board. Same dice. Same 4 squares in the same order. One rulebook produces a last survivor. The other produces a table where everybody has more than they sat down with. I did not write 2 games. I wrote 1 board and 2 ways of reading it, and I expected you to play them back to back in one evening and notice which one you enjoyed and be uncomfortable about the answer. In 1906 I formed a company with other Georgists and published it ourselves. It sold in the Northeast, to left-wing intellectuals, to Quakers in Atlantic City and Philadelphia, to economics professors. Scott Nearing taught it to his students at Wharton. Students at Harvard and Columbia and Pennsylvania made their own boards by hand. And that is where it left me. Hand-copied boards do not carry rulebooks. They carry the rules the last player remembered. People remembered the version where you win. The names drifted. Auction, finance, Monopoly. In Atlantic City, two Quakers, Jesse and Eugene Rayford, put local street names on the squares. A man named Charles Darrow learned the game from friends, redrew it, and sold it to Parker Brothers as his own invention, made in his basement. In 1932, my second edition finally went out with both rulebooks printed in the same box, under the names Monopoly and Prosperity. 2 games, 1 board, as intended. It was 28 years too late. In 1935, Parker Brothers paid me $500. I want to be precise about what they bought, because almost everyone gets this wrong, and the truth of it is worse. They did not buy the 1904 patent. They could not. It had expired in 1921, and the loop, the properties, the rents, all of it had been public property for 14 years. Anyone could have printed it. They already had. What they bought was my second patent, granted in 1924, with different claims, $500 for a document that stopped almost nothing. There were no royalties. There was never a royalty. In January of 1936, I sat down with reporters in Washington, with the boards in front of me, and I told them plainly that Darrow had not invented it. The Post printed it. The Evening Star printed it. Parker Brothers responded by agreeing to publish 2 more of my games, Bargain Day, King's Men, and by continuing to print Darrow's name on the box. I died in 1948, aged 81. I was not credited. It took a man named Ralph Anspach, sued by Parker Brothers over a game he called Anti-Monopoly, to go looking through the patent record in the 1970s and find my name on it. So, the board survived. Both rulebooks were printed. One was copied by hand across the Northeast until it was the only one anybody could remember, and the other is a footnote. I have never thought that was an accident. I think one of those games is much easier to explain to a stranger in 5 minutes, and much harder to stop playing. Go and look in the cupboard. The board is still a loop.